Time for Ismail Kushkush and Khalid Beydoun. How's everyone doing? We're getting a little bit more people. That's good. That's awesome. That's great. Everyone coming in and stuff. Bizsouk, everybody? Everybody enjoying the Bizsouk? Nice. The bazaar, just so many different vendors. Like I said, make sure that you're supporting these vendors. Open all day today, all day tomorrow. Even when we wrap up with these panel discussions, make sure you head over. Ooh, that is beautiful. Oh, wow, right there in the front row. That is amazing. Oh, and it's got right there on the top to make some noise. Make some noise when you're moving. I like that. That's nice. All right, awesome. Really, I swear this will be a really quick story that will tie in to this, okay? So at the beginning of my broadcasting career, I was up in the UP. In the Upper Peninsula. And in case, if you don't know where that is, that's where Santa Claus lives, okay? So I was up there, okay? And for 4 years, I was the only Arabi, the only Muslim, okay? For 4 years. And then I was at an event, and some dude shows up. Looks just like me. And you know how, Arab, when we see each other like in like different areas, what are you doing here? Who are you? And everyone was just talking about how amazing this young man was. And they were even coming up to me, Sam, oh my God, you gotta talk to this guy. He's so well-spoken. And I was like, I'm well-spoken too. And that man is Dr. Abdul El-Sayed. He was in. And now he has shifted his focus to running for the U.S. Senate to represent Michigan. And we're going to have a Meet the Candidate panel discussion right now. So please welcome Dr. Abdul El-Sayed and our moderator, ADC's own, Suehaila Ayman. You got it, no problem.
So he and I are the only two Arab who've had pasties, which really should be pronounced besties, but...
It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to this panel and to introduce one of its standout voices, Dr. Abdul El-Sayed. Please, he does deserve a round of applause. Now, I need to first share with you, aside from Abdul being a good friend of mine, and we've known each other for
decades.
2 decades now, probably. I want to share that ArabCon, and I hope you will give us a round of applause, is run by women. So I'd like to, we love Abid Ayoub, and he is our executive director, and he does such a fabulous job. But behind every strong man is an extraordinary woman. So I'll pull a Snoop move and say I'd like to thank myself. And I'd like to thank Valentina Pereda, our comms director, and Yasmin Asmar, who is our event producer. They've done an exceptional job in bringing this event to you. And I say that because I think it's important to also highlight the people who are amplifying the voices of women and putting women in places where they deserve to be because of the talents and skills that they bring to the table. And I say that because my dear friend, Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, does just that. And he has always been a source of support to women in our community and helps us to amplify our voices and ensure that we're telling our stories as opposed to other people telling them for us. So thank you, my dear friend, for being such a rock star and supporter of women. So let me begin by telling you a little bit about Dr. El-Sayed. His journey is not the trajectory that we typically expect in politics. He was trained as a doctor and epidemiologist, but he quickly recognized that many of the health challenges that we're seeing is rooted in systemic failures, broken policies, unequal access, and a government that too often favors the powerful over the people. The realization has driven him to build and lead with both purpose and expertise. In Detroit, he led the city's public health agency during its most dire financial days, helping rebuild essential functions after bankruptcy. He also and later on had worked as director of Wayne County's Department of Health and Human and Veteran Services, serving 1.8 million Michiganders as he transformed the agency's approach, securing free glasses for children, removing lead from Detroit schools, and making life-saving Narcan readily accessible, and spearheading a program to erase up to $700 million in medical debt for over 300,000 people over 2 years. That certainly deserves a round of applause. These aren't just policy wins, they speak to a pattern of leadership that's rooted in accountability, boldness, and empathy. And in each role, Dr. El-Sayed has shown not only that the government can be effective, but that it must be responsive to real human needs. Now, as one of the Democratic candidates for Michigan's open U.S. Senate seat in 2026, we cannot publicly endorse, but I will personally endorse. Dr. El-Sayed brings that same rigor and urgency that he's applied in local and county arenas to the national stage. He's vowed to never accept corporate PAC money and is positioning himself as a fighter for the everyday person, and that combination of record and resolve is what makes his candidacy so compelling. His lived expertise, public health lens, and willingness to challenge entrenched systems gives us reason to believe that the next chapter of his public service could make a difference not just for Michigan, but how we imagine federal government itself. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Abdul El-Sayed.
That's too kind. I'm grateful to be here. And Suehaila, I got to say that, I would edit your statement that it's not behind every capable man, it's in front of. So
I'll take that. Thank you. You know, Abdul, let's get started with a very simple, yet I think a very important question. Why are you running for this office?
Yeah. You know, I've had the privilege of wearing many hats in my career. And the hat that I'm most grateful to have worn and the one that I try to lead with is being my grandmother's grandson. My grandmother, my teta Suad, was the wisest, most intelligent person I ever met in my life. She never got to go to school. She was the 9th of 14. She gave birth to 8 children. 2 of them died before their first birthdays. Now, I'd get shipped off to Masr, usually before school was even out, and I would land in Alexandria. I'd hang out with my aunts, uncles, cousins, and my grandmother. And my grandmother saw it fit to teach me some really sharp lessons, as great-grandmothers do. And you know, I walk around with my American swagger, my hat backwards. My teta would sit me down. Habibi, come sit down. Point to one of my cousins. That one is smarter than you. Point to the next one. I don't have to tell you, is taller and better looking than you. That one works harder. That one's nicer. That one's more athletic. And at some point, I'm now a puddle on the floor. And I'm like, teta, what do I got going for me? She says, you know, Habibi, you got the most important thing of all. I was like, okay, what's that? She's like, you get to go back to America at the end of the summer. And so, the crazy thing for me is I would go 15 hours and cross 10 years difference in life expectancy. I experienced that in an aunt and uncle I never got to meet. But I didn't have to go 15 hours. I could go 15 minutes from where I grew up and travel the same 10-year life expectancy gap. I wanted to fix that. And that's the reason I went into medicine. It's the reason I went into public health. It's the reason I'm running for Senate. And I know, deeply know, and I think all of us here know, and we reflect on the challenges that we see here with our neighbors or the challenges that we see abroad, is that talent, capacity, evenly distributed. Opportunity is not. And the question for us is always about how do we make sure that there is an even distribution of opportunity, whether it's within 15 minutes or 15 hours? And how do we make sure that our government is on the right side of doing that? And to me, right now, the most urgent and obvious question is, why is it so hard to convince policymakers to invest in our own kids here and so easy to send our money abroad, to subsidize foreign militaries, to do genocides on other people's kids? And that's the question that should be framing all of us, all of our engagement in public service. And it's that question that I think my teta would have wanted me to be asking right now, and so I'm trying to ask that on the biggest possible stage to be able to make the biggest possible impact.
And you have been doing an exceptional job doing that. And we are proud of all of the work that you've been doing and the way that you have been traveling around the state, and it has been so moving as someone who has watched you grow and and thrive in your various spaces doing your work, to see how many people are turning out for you. Like Sam was saying, like in the UP up north, where we often don't see people who look like us and have our similar stories. So it's been very profound to watch you and to see that joy that you're bringing to others, because you're speaking to them directly. You're not just addressing issues that they are concerned about, but issues that are impacting them on a much more personal level. And shifting to issues that are impacting us on a personal level, we see that Gaza is the most prominent global issue that we're dealing with at the moment. And it's one that is of great urgency and importance to our community. What we are looking at right now has been unprecedented. We have seen genocides happen before, but the fact that it's in real time, live on your phone in front of you, that you're able to access at any point, has been something that has deeply impacted each and every one of us, as well as those across the global community. So as an activist, as an advocate, as an organizer, as a doctor, what do you feel we are getting right and wrong about advocacy at this point in time?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. Let me start with what we're getting right. I think what we're getting right is the will to finally show up authentically in 100% and not be cowed or turned away by the idea that somehow standing up for the lives of one group of people at all diminishes any other people. I have been so moved by the advocacy, the engagement, the honesty, the humanity that's animated so much of the effort to demonstrate our commitment to the well-being of the Palestinian people, the opportunity for the Palestinian people to have nothing short of the peace and the dignity and the right to self-determination that all peoples deserve. Let me talk a little bit about where I think we could do better. I think sometimes because of the emotions of the thing, and frankly, because of the way that we transact our conversation, we have allowed the implicit logic of the internet to teach us different ways of engaging. On the internet, you do well when you dunk on someone else. And the problem with it is that we don't realize that on the internet, you're usually talking to people who either agree with you or don't. But that middle group of people you sometimes miss. And so there's this logic of how you engage, which is the loudest, the most intense, is the most persuasive. And I think in the real world, right, the most persuasive is the most persuasive. Saying it louder doesn't necessarily mean saying it better. It may feel better, and I understand why. But I think we owe it to the movement to say it better, to ask, who am I actually talking to here, and how do I get into a place where they hear my words? And I think that one of the things that I've really appreciated about this experience, I've been to 57 cities now. I've done 101 public events, town halls and meet and greets and all these things. And you could be in Escanaba, which is a place that only Sam knows about in the UP, or Clare, or Three Rivers, or Antrim County. And when you talk about the fact that money is zero sum and every dollar that we spend abroad is a dollar that we're not spending on our own children, people understand the double loss of that. Not only is our dollar going to kill or take away food from a child, but it is actually being wasted on the opportunity to invest in food for a child or a school for a child right here in Michigan or right here in America. And I think being able to sit in the cut, look someone in the eye, agree on basic values, and then build out an argument, that is the most powerful thing we can do. And I think sometimes we want to blame people for not seeing the emotional or the spiritual or, frankly, just the basic logic of our position. And we get frustrated and angry that they don't already agree with us. And what I'll tell us is, maybe if we were willing to spend more time doing the early persuasive work, I think we have truth, we have honesty, and we have integrity on our side. And I just encourage all of us to really tuck in and start making that argument in the kindest, most persuasive, most honest, most direct way. Because here's the thing. When you bring your argument with anger, you may lose the opportunity to win somebody with love. And I just find that there are more people who are ready to receive a message than you think. And I'll tell you this, I think sometimes as Arab, we engage in the world, and W.E.B. Du Bois talks about this idea of a double consciousness, that you're both conscious of the person in front of you and conscious of the way they perceive you. And I think sometimes our own consciousness of ourselves keeps us from being willing to show up as our whole selves. A lot of people who got a lot of love in their hearts out there, they haven't been corrupted by everything that everybody's been saying about people who may look like you and me. And I think when we lead on the honesty and the integrity and the humanity of that, I think we win.
Thank you. As our work continues to help protect the people of Gaza, we see that kids in our own communities are suffering. And I know that that's been a huge bulk of the work that you've been doing, and it's something that's very important to you. So how do you see these goals in protecting our children as one that intersects and connects to us helping to protect the people of Gaza as well?
So, I spent my whole career studying medicine and public health to help to take care of people in our own community. I left a potentially very lucrative clinical career to go into public health in a decision that everybody, including my own parents, were like, what are you doing? I rebuilt the health department in America's poorest city, and now I've served Wayne County, which is Michigan's poorest county. All of the work that I've tried to do has been about trying to ask, how do you build opportunity through health for the people who our country has left behind? And money is zero sum. A dollar spent here is a dollar you're not spending there. And I think there's an opportunity for us to recognize that on both sides of our engagement with public life, we don't have to choose between bringing our authentic understanding of what the consequences of bad decision-making in American public policy has meant for people in countries from whence we came, with an honest understanding of the terrible consequences that people in positions of power are making when it comes to our neighbors here at home. Those are one and the same. And I think, honestly, when we engage with our neighbors to say, hey, look, I'm coming at you as a neighbor who lives on your street. I may look a little bit different. I may have a name that has different sounds than the names you've got. I may pray in a different way. But I want the same things for my kids. You see it every day in the way I live my life, and I want those things for your kids. And while our government is failing to provide these things for your kids, it is sending our money abroad to take things away from other people's kids at the same time. And so I think there's almost been this figurative schizophrenia about how we engage with politics. Like, am I wearing my domestic policy hat or am I wearing my foreign policy hat? And I just want us all to put on our justice hat. Because when our government fails people abroad, it fails people here at home as well. When our government fails people at home, it is because it is actively failing people abroad. And justice knows no place or time. Justice is true everywhere. And I think when we bring that forward and we're willing to engage on the consequences here at home as people who are authentically American, authentically from Michigan in my case, I know we win that argument both here and abroad.
It's been very interesting to follow your campaign, and I've really been fascinated because I know I wouldn't accompany you to many of the cities that you've been traveling to. And I was just actually sharing with Dr. Muhammad Tahir when we were talking outside that there are things that I don't even do as a visible Muslim woman because I always have concerns and I'm always afraid when I'm out in public spaces. We were talking about, events and activities. I won't go to a baseball game where people are sitting and drinking for hours on end, potentially putting myself in a position where someone may say something to me. And I'm always very conscious of that, and I have to be aware of all of those things. So I'm wondering, there's a lot of people who think someone who is from our community doesn't have the capability to have a successful campaign across the state. And we know that the state is extremely diverse. We are blessed to be in southeastern Michigan with communities of every background where we work cohesively and collectively together as a well-functioning machine, really. And it's something that we take great pride in. And I know Abdul and I have worked in organizing spaces over the years. And we've seen that. We've seen the growth of our community and how we've been able to take things to other areas and work with our allies across Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb County in the Tri-County area. But beyond those borders, we don't often see people who look like us, or we don't often see ourselves represented. So I'm just curious, especially with a name like Abdul, what are you learning as you travel this state and you're meeting with communities beyond this Tri-County area that we're so, often close to and are comfortable in?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, I had a bit of a head start on this. So I was raised by my father, who's an Egyptian immigrant, and my stepmom, Jackie, who is a daughter of the American Revolution from right here in Michigan, Gratiot County. So I grew up my whole life talking to folks in the middle of Michigan who probably would never have come across Arab or Muslim Americans but for this odd situation in which my dad marries into this family. I could tell you that, I have family who voted for Trump, but those folks love me and love my siblings as much as they love any of the other cousins. And I think we have to give people the privilege of complexity. Because one of the tricks that happens is we transact a lot of our engagement with the world via social media. And I just want you to understand the incentives of social media. Social media feeds you things that keep you looking. That's the whole point. Their goal is to keep your eyes and your ears on that feed so that they can sell you stuff you probably don't need. All right? That's the whole goal. And they give you that in two things. They give you things that you like and things that you fear, because those emotions keep you looking. And so when you're caught in an algorithm, for people who look like us, they're gonna show you the worst side of the thing. And then what happens is, if you're not really interacting, because now you're saying, oh, it's a scary world out there, you assume that that's just what it looks like. That's what the world is. And I knew that that's not necessarily what the world is. The reasons that people might have voted for Donald Trump, they're complex. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of folks who voted for Donald Trump because of the racism. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is, I think we gotta give people the benefit of the doubt. And so that makes me sad. You've got so much to offer outside the Tri-County area. I want a Michigan, I want a world where you should not fear what you look like, where you can go anywhere and have conversations with anyone and assume that you are going to be seen for who you are, not what you look like. But I'll tell you this, most Americans want that same thing too. And I think what you gotta do is you gotta kind of put yourself out there and say, yeah, look, my name is a little bit different than yours, but I know that you don't really care as much how I pray, you care what I pray for. I know you don't care as much what I look like, you care whether or not I'm willing to look after your needs. I know that if I show up here, you may actually show up here. If I come several miles, you'll come a couple of inches. And I think the more that we do that, and the more that we bring our humanity out there, out of love, out of devotion for our state, the more people are gonna see us. And I just think that that's the kind of thing that actually heals. If you don't like the hate you see out there, the only antidote to hate is love. And I know why I'm running. I want people to have health care. I want people to have access to a good job. I want them not to have to worry about affording their eggs. I want them to breathe clean air and drink clean water, and I'm gonna say that everywhere I go. And when people hear me say that, they might actually be like, I never thought I'd be voting for a guy named Abdul, but here we go.
We've been very lucky, especially in the last, I would say in the last 15 years. Here in Michigan, we've seen an influx of young people putting their hat in the race and going into spaces, working in spaces that, often we don't see them in. We are a people who love to shove our kids into STEM fields because we're looking at our future retirement plans as well as their own. But, and I say this because I'm, even on the back end as someone born and raised here, I have my nephew Adam, who's now in med school, alhamdulillah, in Tennessee. And, we always joke, you're our retirement plan, kid. We need to, keep you focused. But
Orthopedics, inshallah.
But I see the way young people have been shifting their focus, and they're actually looking at public office, they're looking at civil service, and that's something that is a source of pride for all of us. What do you feel is something people misunderstand about working in or running for office or working in that space, and how do we actually move politicians to shift the way they view certain policies or even just view our community? How can we engage people to be more understanding of what it actually means to run for public office, and how do we move those politicians forward to see what it is that we need as a community, and not just as different immigrant or ethnic communities or marginalized communities, but what we need as a collective community to move forward.
Now, I really love that question. I'll say a couple things. Number one, I don't think anybody who's looking to vote for someone is like, man, I can't wait to elect a career politician for one rung higher on the ladder than the one they were on, right? And I think that's part of the problem of our politics, is that people think of politics as just a career choice rather than a avocation, a thing that someone chooses to enter into as a function of their public service and their public orientation. So to that end, I actually think, if you think about the US Senate as a body of 100 lawmakers, you know what I think the US Senate might actually be needing right now in the era of RFK Jr. is maybe a physician epidemiologist who's run health departments to rebuild after whatever the F he's about to do, right? And so, I may not be a career politician, but I think the skill set that I've built out and honed may actually be useful. And I think all of us ought to be asking, what is the thing, I talk to young people, I think we do them a disservice. We say, what do you want to be when you grow up? As if the being and the doing are two of the same thing. And I think the better questions are, what do you want to change when you grow up, and how do you want to change it? And I think if you get folks in positions where they're doing things they implicitly love doing because there's passion and engagement with that work, toward the end that they want to accomplish in the world, people do their best work. And those ends change with time. So I hope, regardless of what folks do, people will ask, how do I render public service from the space within I am working? And then also, if I choose at some point to say, I'm going to dedicate my work to public service, that they see the value in being able to bring their diverse backgrounds to this. But it requires us to be public servants in our core. So my ask of folks out there is to say, look, politics isn't a career choice that you have to enter into after college. Politics is about recognizing that we collectively, so long as we can maintain it, have a system that allows us to come together to choose our leaders, to make big decisions about where society ought to go. And we need anyone and everyone to be a participant in that system. So from wherever you are, I hope that you'll ask, what is the degree of my participation? If it's, hey, I'm going to show up to vote, phenomenal. If it's, I'm going to make sure I go out and knock doors and work in organizations that are moving our politics, amazing. If it's, I'm going to run for local office, fantastic. If it's, I'm going to run for US Senate, great, really hard to do, but great, right? But either way, no matter what that is, ask, how can I contribute to the collective with the skills that I have? And what do I bring to the conversation that's necessary? And don't let anybody tell you that your contribution isn't necessary, because I promise you, if they tell you that and you believe it, their goal is to make sure that you are not represented in the decision-making that gets made. And I think we've seen the consequences of that. So all of us need to do what we can with what we have, where we are, and recognize that all of us have something to add to this. And inshallah, right, we build the kind of America that's more inclusive and more engaging and makes better decisions because all of us decided to be partners and participants in that word of being a citizen in our democracy.
Thank you, Abdul. As we wrap up this session, I wanted to, as somebody who has worked for the better part of almost 30 years now on youth programming and youth engagement and encouraging our young people to become more active, to become more vocal, and to begin telling their stories. Like I said, we're in a position where oftentimes there are other people wanting to tell our stories for us, and there are so many extraordinary experiences that we have and that we come with, not just as a people or as a collective community, but in our own individual ways, the things that we're contributing to society and how we're helping society to move forward. There are so many amazing things that are coming out from our communities, and we need to start amplifying our own voices. And that's why I say it's important to sit with people like Dr. El-Sayed and so many other extraordinary leaders on the panels that we have throughout the weekend, because these are the people who have either paved the way, are paving the way, or are charting their own territories so that many of the younger generation that will follow will have spaces to move into that may be outside of the norms of what they're accustomed to. So what piece of advice would you give? Because we have a lot of students with us this weekend. What is a couple nuggets or gems of information that you can drop on our youth? I was just in DC last week with MPAC, and I was sitting and talking to some of the younger staff, and I told them, for me, one of the best things that someone had taught me while I was growing up was to build quality relationships, to not have your relationships be transactional, that you should meet people and connect with people on a human level. So what would you say to our young people in the crowd who may be looking at, or to other members of our attendees who are committed to advocacy work and activism, and how they can possibly take their work and move into that space of public service?
Well, I got to say, you think about an iceberg. There's the bit of the iceberg that's above the water, but the most important part of the iceberg is the part that's under the water. And I happen to be a part of an iceberg that sits above the water when you're publicly running for office. But the people who make what I'm doing right now possible are people like you, who are doing civic work to build and to organize and to create opportunity and to drive the conversation. So I gotta say, the privilege is mine, and I just deeply appreciate the opportunity to share the stage. I wanna say three things, and I really hope, especially the young folks, but also the parents of young folks, will hear me out on this one. Number one, your kids know themselves and know the future they're gonna live in way better than you do. And I say this as a father of like two very little kids, and I understand the urge to be like, I've got your whole life planned out for you. But they know the time they're made for, and they know their skills, and they know what they have joy in. And so empowering them to discover and creating space for them to like be what they're gonna be is huge. The second is, especially for you young folk, become a student of craft. I think everybody here thinks that outcomes just happen. Like people look at talent and they're just like, oh, talent. Well, that person has talent, that person doesn't. There's no such thing as talent. Talent is work that has been put in and compounded over long periods of time that may start with a nugget of ability, but it's that practice that allowed you to actually do something that looked effortless. To me, if you want to see quality work, it's when somebody makes something look easy. That didn't come because it's easy. It came because they did it when it was hard. And so there's this thing that like folks a little bit younger than me, I can't credibly call myself young anymore, which makes me sad, but like in this generation, people talk about a try hard. Yeah, you should be a try hard, right? If you try hard, then maybe at some point you make it look easy. And so be somebody who's a master of craft. Whatever your craft is, become a master of craft. The little details that nobody else sees that you see. And then the third thing I'll tell you is, I think sometimes we want to have our cake and eat it too, right? We do this thing and we say, well, it's so hard out there and the burden of leadership is so great. So, I don't think I need to. And then people go out and lead and they'll say, well, I shouldn't have to. Like, look, you don't have to lead, but if you choose to lead, then you have to take on everything that leadership takes with it. It is not easy for a reason, but if you're gonna do it the right way. And I personally think we do owe it. And this is the lesson that my grandmother taught me, which is, look, all my other cousins never had the opportunities that I had. My cousin, who was admittedly a lot smarter than me, died in an auto accident at 27. I got to go on and get scholarships and go and study in different places and get these jobs and all this. It's not because I'm smarter than him. It's because I had opportunities he didn't have. And so I owe it to all those folks who did not get those opportunities to use my opportunities to create them for them, whatever I think of it. And at the end of the day, right, we come from communities that are communal. And I think we need to bring that back and embrace that. So yeah, we live in communities and we owe it to serve these communities. You can go off and have a really nice life. But here's my question, at the end of the day, you're still gonna die. So what did you do to make life better for other people? So I do think we owe it to our communities. We owe it to the opportunities we have. There is no better place in the world right now to be an advocate for justice than in the country, as hard as it's getting. So we owe it to use our voices. And the question I'd ask you is, how do you use yours?
Thank you. That is a wrap for our session. Thank you, Dr. El-Sayed. It's our pleasure having you, and I know that this will not be the last stop for you. So good luck to you on the campaign trail, and we look forward to seeing the great things that will come along.
Thank you for all your advocacy and your work. Appreciate you. Thank you.